The Spiritual Spectra Talk Show. Today we're going to be talking about giving of ourselves. When is it too much? We're going to be hearing from astrologer and soul guidance coach, Sajit Green. We will be talking with her today about selflessness. I've just sent Sajit an invite to join us on our show. You can join us on the Spiritual Spectra Talk Show on a monthly basis. The Spiritual Spectra Talk Show is all about promoting emotional, physical, and spiritual wellness. I've sent Sajid an invite, so I'm waiting for her to get on the line. So I guess we're having some technical difficulties to get Sajid on the line. I apologize for waiting. I'm emailing back and forth with Sajid, and she said she got the invite, but I guess she's having difficulty getting on the actual line. So I'm sorry, this is our first time trying out Google Hangout, so I hope you have a little patience with that. Sajid, hi, welcome to the talk show.
Hi, Jennifer. We made it. Here we are.
Yes, I'm so glad. So I gave an introduction telling the audience what we're going to be talking about today. So I was really intrigued about what you sent me about selflessness. We tend to think of selflessness as just a good thing. We give to other people, we help to other people. Much of our community is about giving to others and helping others. And so I liked your approach and where you really think about, well, when is giving of yourself just a little bit too much? When are you losing yourself to another person in a relationship? When do you feel kind of lost in that relationship because you've given so much of yourself? So I'd like to hand it off to you, and please share with us some of your wisdom on this subject.
Thanks, Jennifer. So I'd like to just maybe take a step or two back and put this in the context of what's happening today. I know that not everybody who watches will be watching, on the day that we're doing the Hangout. But the energies that are going on today for us astrologically, and when I say us, I mean for the collective, is that there's a lot of Piscean energy today. The moon is in Pisces, Neptune, Mars, and Chiron. It's a lot of Pisces energy. And Pisces is very spiritual. It's about our experience of oneness, which is our spiritual reality, that we are all one. and people who have a lot of Pisces energy in their charts, and I think you said you're a sun in Pisces, right?
Right.
So you're very attuned to the oneness. And in that oneness, in our spiritual reality, there really truly is no separation. And as human beings on this three-dimensional plane, we have our own separate personalities, that our own separate selves. We each have our own bodies, and our individual selves have our own needs and preferences and desires and our boundaries. You know, it's like if you were to say to me, "Hey, Saji, you know, we're one, so I'm going to come and sit on top of you," I'd be like, "Hell no! You know, I'm not going to let anybody sit on top of me. You know, I still have boundaries, and those boundaries have validity and importance on this level of the physical dimension, and also our emotional boundaries. If you were to just like lay into me and start yelling at me and cursing and calling me names, again, I'd say, hell no, it's not okay for you to cross my emotional boundaries in that way, to be verbally abusive towards me. So while Pisces is very attuned to that place of being beyond the self on a spiritual level, it's also important to know on the human personality level, where are your boundaries? When do you need to draw the line in the sand? When do you need to say, no, you know, I'm not going to do that for you, or I can't do that for you, or you can't do that to me? So I'm curious for you, because you are a Pisces person, you know, what you'd like to share about this, that challenge of sort of finding, like, where are the boundaries, and how do you know when to say no? When is it okay to say no? What would you like to share about that, being a Pisces?
Well, for me, boundaries has always been a challenge because I'm an empathic person, so I feel other people's emotions. But for a long time, I didn't really realize that that was an ability that I had. It was just how I felt about other people. I cared about other people. I didn't realize that it was actually a specific gift. And so I would constantly take on the emotions of other people. And what was happening to them would affect me. And I would find myself worrying about them, concerning about them. And this isn't just close friends I'm talking about. This could be like a random person that I met in the supermarket. And something in their story and their life stuck with me, and I didn't realize that I was absorbing their spiritual energy. And that I was taking it on for myself. And that that's what was really going on. It took me, it wasn't really until the last few years that I really started, until I started to really explore myself spiritually, actively, that I started to realize that that's what was going on. And it wasn't until I learned how to do energy healing that I really learned that I needed to constantly be healing myself and letting that go. And it made me realize why my boundaries in my relationships prior to this weren't really healthy. You know, my family relationships, my work relationships, I was constantly letting people cross over those boundaries. And back in about 2000, 2001, I discovered this book called Boundaries. And it is a great book. I don't know if you've ever read it.
No.
And it is a fabulous book. It's from a Christian perspective, so if someone is Christian, they would definitely love this book because it has a lot of biblical quotes. But even for those that are not Christian or atheist, there's so much wisdom in this book about boundaries, and it really shows you that it's okay. And that's one of the things I loved about the perspective is so much of ourselves is, oh, we're taught we need to give of ourselves, we need to share of ourselves. And so the book was about, you know, really saying that it's okay to put a boundary around ourselves, around our minds, around our hearts. And it used the metaphor of, like, we have houses and we have fences around those houses, and the fence is meant to protect that house. And that it's okay to put a fence around your life and around your person, so long as there's a gate. And then you choose when to open that gate and let
Yes.
someone in, or when to
Yes.
close it to when it's not appropriate.
Yes.
That book also talked about, it had chapters on one for relationships, one for work, one for family, one for romantic relationships. So it helped to break down their particular principles in those different types of relationships we have in our life. That's what really
Mm-hmm.
helped me to start creating boundaries. But it wasn't
Mm.
until I really also looked at it from a spiritual perspective that I could see the whole of what was happening to me personally.
Uh-huh.
And so I definitely think that people need to realize that boundaries are a good thing. But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, there are people who put up too many blocks and they're like a big brick wall in front of them.
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
not healthy either. I think you have to find a balance between that brick wall that doesn't let anybody in at all
Yeah.
to
Mm-hmm.
where you just have like no boundaries, no gates, and you just let people trawl all over you. Uh,
Yes.
and so it's a
The
challenge to reach that balance. And being Piscean, like you said yourself, that doesn't make it any easier.
Yeah. Um, and something that you said really touched on the things about Pisces and being that open that are really helpful, which is that's the part of you that makes you very intuitive as well as very empathic. You're able to really tune into other people's energies and their emotions and maybe even their thoughts. And so it's very helpful for you as a healer, as as an intuitive, as a guide for people. And we all have Pisces somewhere in our charts, even if we're not a Pisces sun or a Pisces moon. Everybody has it somewhere in their chart. So everyone has the potential to be very intuitive and to be very sensitive and empathic and sensitive and open. And we also all have somewhere in our charts the polar opposite sign, which is Virgo. And Virgo is that gate that you were mentioning, and being able to make those decisions about when do you open the gate, when do you close the gate. So Virgo, even though Virgo oftentimes gets a bad rap, people think of Virgo as being very like picky or critical, perfectionistic. Those are sort of the negative things that people project onto Virgo. But in its essence, Virgo is about discernment. And so it's not about, well, either we have this wall or we have just a total open, field and anything can come in. But we need to have that power of discernment and know what do we want to allow in and what do we want to allow out as well in terms of our own energy, and what do we not want to allow in or out. And one thing in biology that I think is a really great metaphor for that process is that in our cells, in our physical body, each cell has a boundary around it, and it's an intelligent boundary. And that boundary does make decisions about what is it going to allow into the cell, what's like in the cell that doesn't need to be in there, needs to be expelled from the cell, what needs to be, what's toxic and needs to be released, or what's nurturing and nourishing and what do we need to take in. So that intelligence of discernment, that's the Virgo energy, and you've also got that somewhere in your chart. And as a healer or an intuitive person, not just for you, but for anyone who's who's watching, someone who is very spiritually oriented and wants to be open to communicating with their guides and receiving intuitive information, they also need to learn about how to set their boundaries, energetically, emotionally, all in all of those ways that you mentioned. And then how do we know what's giving too much? Well, if you feel like you're drained or you're overly impacted by other people's emotions, if you're feeling like you're getting lost, like you don't really know who you are anymore, or you don't know where the boundaries are, those are some of the red flags that maybe you're giving too much or that you're not setting your boundaries, in a healthy way. I also think that for a lot of women, that even though now we've had how many decades of the women's lib movement, I still believe that women are socialized more so than men to be people pleasers and to say, yes, when people ask us for something or to do something for them, we want to be nice, we want people to like us, we want to be nurturing. And so I think especially for women it can be challenging to know where our boundaries are and how to find that balance, like you were saying, and in relationships, am I giving too much, or am I just being, is this a healthy kind of generosity, or am I giving too much and am I losing myself? And sometimes it can be really helpful to have someone else to talk to help you get some perspective on, are you giving too much? Sometimes it's hard to know.
Oh, most definitely. I think that as women, we're taught to give, but we're never taught any boundaries. We're never taught that you can give to a certain point. Mm-hmm. And I think when I've counseled a lot of women, that they don't see that boundary of when they have to stop, and mm-hmm. where there's a burden to themselves, where they're giving so much of themselves that they have no time left, no energy to even do what needs to be done because they're so sparsed out. I've met women who are go-getters, and so they are, active in the career, active in the family life, want to help with the kids' schools, and they're just spread out so thin. Mm-hmm. And they don't, delegate and don't give and say, it's okay for the kids to pick up their own laundry and do their own laundry at a certain age, and to pick up their toys. Even if they're 4 years old, they can pick up their toys. You don't have to do everything for them. But we're taught that that's our role, to give, but we don't ever taught what that boundary is where we go too far. And that can be seen professionally as well. A lot of times in the work environment, a woman can be too helpful to her colleague and then find herself out of a job or out of a promotion because they've shared so much of themselves that that person has taken over, whether they did it on purpose, strategically against them, or whether it just happened. And so we need to learn what that boundary is, and then it's that we do have to set a certain boundary. I remember this episode of Oprah that I really liked, and somebody made a comment on it that stuck with me. And it was funny because when the person made the comment, the response from the female audience was overwhelming. They were like, "Oh my gosh, that's terrible. Why would you even think of such a thing?" So they said that, when you're on an airplane and you're flying, they always tell you, they give you the little emergency instructions, and they tell you that should something happen and the plane lose pressure, those things will come out air on. And they always tell you that you're supposed to put yours on first before you put on anybody else's.
Yeah.
And so they said, this person used this as a metaphor for life, that you have to give to yourself first before you give to other people. And the audience was just like, well, that's ridiculous. You can't really use that as a metaphor. Wow. An emergency situation, blah, blah, blah. Wow. And so she said, the person then responded and said, well, think about why they say that on the airplane. The thing comes down, you put it on, then you put it on the other person. What if you didn't do that? What if you went to try to put it on your kids first? Then you lose oxygen in the meantime, you haven't finished putting it on them, and you pass out, which means they're going to pass out as well. So what good is that if you don't have the oxygen you need to be able to put it on them? And so he used the oxygen as a metaphor for energy. If we don't have the emotional, physical, spiritual energy to give to somebody else, then we're just going to pass out. We're going to be spent. And the audience was sort of like, I'll never forget that episode because the audience was sort of like, when she finally explained it, just kind of like silence. Like they were processing it, like, and they weren't sure if they kind of bought into it, but it just made me realize, though, like, as women, we don't give of ourselves first. We're not taught to give of ourselves first. We are taught to give to everybody else, and then we're last. And like you said, even though we live in the 21st century, unfortunately, I don't really see that changing all too much.
Yeah. And also for people, whether they're men or women, I think a lot of times healers or people in the helping professions also fall into that pattern of, give, 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 and then before they realize it, they're totally drained and they don't have any more to give. A book that's coming to my mind is something that was actually very popular back in, I don't know if it was the 70s or the 80s, and I never really hear this book mentioned anymore, but it was called When I Say No, I Feel Guilty. And I remember reading that book when I was in my early 20s, and it was like, that's absolutely true. If I say no to someone, I feel guilty. And so we need to realize that it's okay to say no. Saying no is a way of setting a boundary. And it's okay to say no. We don't have to feel guilty. And that it's not a requirement of, to be a spiritual person doesn't mean that we need to just say yes all the time or be this just totally open, a wide open field that has no boundaries or that never gets angry. Anger is another way of setting a boundary. That's one of the,
a negative boundary.
What?
It's not a negative way, but yes. And sometimes, unfortunately, I think that's a boundary that comes as a result of someone not setting a healthy boundary. Because they didn't set the healthy boundary, then the negative boundary of anger comes out.
Yes, yes. Or, if another person is not respecting our boundary, we might set our boundaries, but if someone else doesn't respect those boundaries and invades them either physically, emotionally, energetically, then it's appropriate to get angry to reestablish the boundary and say, no, that's not okay. And it doesn't have to be done, like all smiling and sweet. We can say in an angry kind of way without being, nasty or, aggressive. That's that difference between being assertive rather than aggressive. It's okay to be assertive. And that doesn't mean that we have to, be cursing or calling names or verbally attacking. It's just to establish this is where my line is. This is where my boundary is. Right. This is what's okay and not okay with me.
Exactly.
Another thing about Pisces is that it's a water sign, and each of the water signs is like a certain form of water. So, for example, Cancer is a form of water that's like a very calm, still lake or pool of water that's very safe and it's very nurturing. And then Scorpio is the form of water that's like deep down in a well. You go deep, deep, deep down, into the psyche or into yourself and discover your own shadow or your deepest, most intense emotions. The Pisces form of water is vapor, water vapor. So it's like a mist or a cloud or a fog. And if you think about a vapor, driving your car and it's all foggy, what happens when you're in a fog?
You don't see where you're going.
You can't see where you're going. You don't see very clearly. And so that's another thing that can happen with the Pisces energy is that maybe we don't see very clearly what are our boundaries or the other person's boundaries, or we don't really see the other person accurately. And that person might be deceiving us, but because of the cloudy fogginess in our vision, we don't even realize right away that they're deceiving us. Or maybe they don't intend to deceive, but we deceive ourselves because of that foggy quality, and we want to see them in the best light. We are hoping that, they're this wonderful person that we like them to be, but maybe they're actually, a drug addict, and we don't realize that right away because we're looking through this cloudy vision. It can also be like looking through rose-colored glasses, where you're looking for this person at their spiritual best, but on the personality level, maybe there's someone who's a liar or very unhealthy for you in some way. So that's another reason why you need to bring in the balance of the opposite, which is Virgo, because Virgo sees things very clearly. It's not at all foggy. And it sees the details of things. And that's why you can be discerning, because you see things really clearly. But the Pisces, not only is it foggy and misty, but it's also really great for your imagination and being creative, being poetic, being an artist. Those are all things that it's great if you have this kind of cloudy, misty vision where the boundaries of things are kind of vaporous or softened. It can be very beautiful and very dreamy and very, like I say, very artistic. But when it comes to our interpersonal relationships, we also need to see things really clearly and accurately.
So would you say that on days like today where Pisces is, powerful, that, and maybe I'm overstepping my boundaries in terms of interpreting, but would you say that if it tends to be more cloudy, would it be better on days like this to separate ourselves from other people and give ourselves time to meditate, to be creative, to do a project that's about creativity, inspiration, meditation, or spiritual, artistic, and maybe not be as actively around people because we're not I won't say impaired judgment perspective, but maybe not the best of judgment days. So it might be a day that we might say, this is a day for the self rather than a day to be with other people. I mean, would you agree with that, or am I kind of overstepping?
Well, I agree with it up to a certain point. I mean, everything you said is true in terms of those kinds of activities that you mentioned are really activities that are very well supported by the Pisces energies, or even things like sleeping and dreaming is very Piscean. For example, I had a really hard time waking up this morning because it was like I couldn't get up out of the dream. I was so in the dream. I remember even actually in the dream I didn't realize I was dreaming. I thought I was awake, and I was trying to like open my eyes. I was walking downstairs and I wanted to open my eyes to see where I was going. And I literally, in the dream, I couldn't make my eyes open, and it was kind of scary. But when I woke up, I realized it was that I was trying to wake up from the dream, and I couldn't wake up. But in terms of what you're saying about not being with other people, isn't necessarily something I would recommend, because there's certain ways of being with others that are really, Pisces is really helpful towards. So it's good to know what are the ways of interacting that Pisces is supportive of. So some examples of ways to interact with others that are really appropriate or helpful under Pisces energy is things like if you're a healer, so working with your clients, doing energy work. If you're an intuitive, working with your clients. If you're lovers with someone and you have a really beautiful relationship, making love under the Pisces energy is awesome because you really merge with the other person. It's like the boundaries dissolve, and it can be incredible for lovemaking. For tantric, that's what tantric sex is all about, is allowing the separation to dissolve. But if you're in the grocery store in line at the checkout counter, you don't want to be merging with the person in front of you in line, So you just need to be discerning about who are you with, what kinds of things are you engaging with that person. Is this someone that you're intimate with or that you're in a healing relationship with? And then, let the Pisces energy flow and let that sense of oneness really emerge between the two of you. But if you're needing to have a business meeting, I'm not saying you should call in sick that day and not go to the meeting. But when you're in the meeting, you need to be aware and really set your energetic boundaries. So if the person sitting next to you around the conference table, if they're having a really shitty day or they're really mad at their spouse, before they came to work, you don't want to be absorbing their emotions. So if you need to be out in the business world or grocery shopping or whatever, just be aware of your boundaries and don't just automatically be in that place of absorbing or merging with other people and their energies.
Okay, so I actually have a question. It's funny you should mention the business side. So tonight I have a business networking event that I'm going to be attending. So let's say, for example, someone else, out there listening has a networking event tonight or some type of business function. So with this energy, what advice would you give me and all those out there as to how to approach this event and how to approach all the people that are there?
Great question. So one thing is to remember that one of the gifts of the Pisces energy is that it does support your intuition. So if you're going to a networking meeting, you can really use your intuition to kind of sense, like, who do you really want to connect with? You know, who's going to be a beneficial connection or a heartfelt connection for you? Who are the people you're in resonance with at this event? So, you know, really tune into your intuition and know that your intuition is enhanced under the Pisces energies, and also be aware of your energetic boundaries so that you're not just absorbing, unconsciously absorbing from other people. So I'm sure you know from, you know, the skills you've learned as an intuitive and a healer that you can be both intuitive and have healthy boundaries at the same time. It's not either or. Like either I'm just totally wide open to everybody and absorbing like a sponge, or I'm open and intuitive. You can be both, but you need to be conscious about how you're working with your own energy and really, you know, be discerning about what are you allowing in and what are you allowing out. You know, like use that metaphor of the boundary around the cell, you know, the cell wall, and be making choices about, you know, what am I letting in, what am I letting out, who am I letting in, who am I not letting in, or to what degree am I letting this person in. I've noticed that even through eye contact, that I can make these subtle shifts within myself. I'm still like looking in the person's eye, but I might not be like totally so open in my eye contact that I'm letting them down into the, you know, they say the windows are the eyes to the soul. Well, I don't really want to let everybody down into my soul. And there's kind of subtle ways you can even work with your own energy through eye contact, where you're still making eye contact and being friendly and socially appropriate, but you're not letting that person go all the way in, or you're not going all the way into them. So it does take a lot of, I think, for some people it takes training, you know, in how to do that kind of subtle energetic work in a moment-to-moment way with people.
It definitely took me training to be able to do that. And it's funny because I had a conversation recently with somebody. I recently did an event. As you know, I'm a psychic medium, and so I recently did an event with a group of people, and it was a group reading. And then afterwards, somebody asked me, they're like, well, are you like, you know, the Long Island medium where wherever she goes, to the supermarket or with her friends, Spirit is there and Spirit wants to talk and she feels compelled to share. And I said, well, if I wanted to be, I could, but I choose not to. And so they looked at me and I explained. I said, I actually can choose to tell Spirit, no, I don't want you to pervade every moment of my life. When I'm at home with my husband and I'm hanging out and I'm chilling, I don't want Spirit coming in and talking to me. You know, some random spirit to like talk to me. No. Yeah. You know, so even with Spirit, I do set those boundaries, and I have to tell Spirit, you know, if I'm at home, don't bug me, don't call on me. If I call on you, then you are welcome to come in. But if I'm not calling on you, don't knock on my door.
Yes.
You know, home is a boundary for me. And even when I'm out and about, you know, I set that boundary. And so when it's appropriate, when I'm meeting with a client or I have like a group reading event, or even with friends who are, you know, open to listening, then I kind of just sort of let myself be open and say, okay, it's okay to come through. But, you know, Teresa, you know, she says that she's compelled. Well, that's a choice that she's making. Maybe she doesn't realize she can tell Spirit, hey, you know, don't talk to me. So maybe she's not aware that she could do that. Or maybe she just chooses not to. Maybe she likes Spirit knocking on the door 24/7.
Yeah.
Maybe she likes that, you know. She's a, you know, very extroverted person, so maybe she likes having Spirit around her all the time. For me, I'm an extroverted person, but at the same time, I have my privacy, and there are times when I don't want Spirit invading, and so I even create that boundary with Spirit. And so I explain that to the person that, and the other reason I do it too, not only for my own energetic, because I don't want to be constantly absorbing Spirit energy all the time, because it can be very exhausting. I can tell you. But also, I also do it for the privacy sake of the people around me. If I'm running into somebody in the grocery store, I don't want to know things about their personal life or what's going on with their life. You know, I don't want to broadcast that. I mean, she has a live reality show, and I think to a certain extent, for those kinds of shows, people know, okay, there's a camera there, so clearly I'm in the public view. But I'm not going to notice a person randomly in the supermarket and talk to them and reveal something about their personal life. I don't need to know that. They have a boundary in terms of their privacy that I don't need to be knowing about. They haven't asked for a consult. They haven't asked me to invade their privacy. And so I try to explain, you know, it is a reality show that she has. People have there's a camera following her. So when she comes up to people, people see that camera and know, I'm going to be on television. So they can also make the choice, if they see that camera coming, to run the opposite direction and say, I don't want to be on camera. So people are making a choice to be on camera with her. And so on some level she is allowing that boundary to be open, but I think that there's a purpose and a reason there, and for her, part of that purpose is to also let other people be aware of spirit around them, and so I think I laud her for that goal, but just to let people know that it doesn't have to be 24/7, and that goes for every person. You don't have to be, you know, 7-Eleven open 24/7 for your family, for your friends. You know, you don't have to be that. You can say no. You can choose to say no, and no is not a bad word.
Yes. And I talk to a lot of clients who have a lot of intuitive gifts. They have a lot of Pisces energy in their chart, or a lot of 12th house, or a lot of Neptune. All of those things, whether it's the sign of Pisces, the 12th house, or the planet Neptune, all of those aspects of astrology have to do with this kind of Piscean nature, this intuitive, sensitive, empathic nature. And so a lot of people who have those kind of innate gifts, they're aware to some degree that they have those gifts, but they're oftentimes afraid to really open to those gifts because they're afraid of, well, is spirit going to be, you know, knocking on my door all the time, or, you know, are bad energies going to come into me, or, you know, am I going to be picking up everybody else's energy? And so it is really important to learn those skills of, I hesitate to use the word how to protect yourself, but it's just more how to be discerning and make those choices about, you know, when you're opening the gate, or which gates you're opening, and when you're not opening them. Just like, you know, when your phone rings, you don't have to answer the phone. Sometimes you let it go to voicemail.
Right.
Or, you know, you get a message on Facebook, or you get something in your email. You can decide whether or not you're going to respond right away, or even if you're going to respond at all.
Yeah, you
don't
can
have to just be this totally open space. What?
I said you can just send it to your spam folder.
I'm sorry, I missed the last thing you said. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
so we need to make those choices.
We need to make those choices and be better at making those choices. And I certainly count myself as one of those people that's still working on that. But I've counseled people where, you know, they want to help others. And I had someone who came to me who had a son and a teenager, and going through, you know, typical teenage rebellion. And so, you know, part of the guidance that I was trying to give her was she wanted to know, was this person going too far? You know, was he, how far gone was he in his rebellion? And so, you know, I told her, I said, well, actually, he's actually really not so much rebelling, so much as he needs community. He needs to have, he's the kind of person who really needs to have a supportive community of friends. And unfortunately, he's not been discerning in who he's chosen to be friends with. He has this group of boys that have chosen for him to be a part of their group, and they do all kinds of things, including some illegal things. And he goes along with it because he has a need to join, a need to be a part of something. And so he's not being discerning in who he's choosing as his friends. he is so desperate to have friends, to have that community, that he's not making a proper choice. And so what I told her, I said, when kids, especially in the teenage rebellious phase, the more you try to tell them what to do, the more they're going to rebel. So I said, instead, give him other opportunities to meet young people that are in a positive environment. Look for, groups, teenage events that he can participate and go to that are positive events where he's going to meet good kids that have good behavior. And so instead of saying, oh, you can't hang out with those kids, and say, hey, you can go here and you can go there. Instead, give him choices of all these wonderful places that he can go. And he'll embrace it, because he'll be like, oh, great, my mom is being so cool. She's letting me go here and go there and hang out here and hang out there. And so he'll meet a wider variety of kids. And as he does, that discernment will kick in, because he'll begin to meet some good kids that open themselves to him, that welcome him, befriend him, and then he'll begin to be like, I really don't need to be with these jerks who are doing all these terrible things, and I think maybe realize that they really don't care about him, they're just using it. But right now, he's not in a place where he can see that. He's like what you said, in terms of that cloud, he has that high-seeing cloud, I'm sure, above him, because he's just lost in this crowd and not discerning anything. And so he needs that Virgo energy of discernment. And so I just said, give him opportunities to meet other kids, and that discernment will kick in. It'll may take some time, but that's why the more you can expose him to positive environments and go to events or functions or groups or people, the better, because then he'll begin to be able to create that discernment, and he won't need, and that's the thing, he feels he needs these kids, and maybe he won't feel like he needs these kids. And so she felt so relieved, because she was really thinking that her son was just, that he was the one that wanted to rebel and do all these terrible things and getting into trouble. And I said, no, he really is a good kid. He's just a follower. And but you need to give him a better leader to follow. And it's not going to be you, because you're the parent, and he's not going to want to listen to you. So you just need to find someone his age that's a good leader for him to follow. So he had not created that discernment. So I guess he's in that Pisces cloud mode and needs a bit of that Virgo energy.
Yeah, definitely. Yes. Let's hear it for Virgo. There's definitely really beautiful things about Virgo, and it gets really maligned by a lot of people.
Yeah, so I definitely, there's boundaries at all ages. It's not just for adults. I think children really need, and teenagers need to learn, and they because adults don't always have healthy boundaries. The kids don't always know how to set boundaries either.
Exactly. Yes.
And they're more easily influenced by those around them.
Very much so. Yeah. I'm curious. I took off my glasses, and I don't know where we are with our time boundary. Do you have a sense of where are we with time?
Well, we are getting close. We are actually. It's funny you mentioned it. We're like right at our time boundary. And so, is there anything else that you would like to share in terms of advice as to how to create those boundaries and what it means to be selfless but not about doormat? Any other wisdom that you would like to share personally, but also astrologically speaking too?
So there's definitely a balance, if we're thinking about it in terms of this polarity between the Virgo and the Pisces, or the being a totally open door or being a discerning gate, that you don't want to like swing from one to the other, like from being just like totally open with no boundaries, like you said before, like to being like having a wall in front of you. And so finding that balance of being discerning without being overly bounded and trying to keep everything out, that's also a skill to learn. And so sometimes people do need support. Some people they're a little bit too overboard with the Virgo, and they're like trying to hold everybody out or thinking everything's toxic to them, or they're just really looking at the flaws in everyone and not seeing the beauty. Or on the Pisces side, it could be going overboard towards just seeing the spiritual essence of the person and how beautiful they are in their spiritual light, but not seeing the realities of their personality. So both sides need sometimes support. People need support in learning how best to use their Pisces energies and how best to use the Virgo and how to find that balance. And that's definitely something I work with a lot with clients. I tend to magnetize people with both. I have a lot of Piscean people in my clients, and also a lot of people with a lot of Virgo. And so I suppose those are lessons I'm learning, or else I wouldn't be magnetizing those clients to myself. So it's certainly a theme that's very much of interest to me. And I used to be a psychotherapist, and I worked with really intense situations. I worked with people who'd experienced torture. And people would say to me, wow, how can you work with people with such intense, trauma? And it's because my boundaries are very strong. But maybe sometimes I could be, really a little bit more empathic than I am. Maybe I'm a little bit too strong on the Virgo side sometimes. And so I'm glad that I wasn't just absorbing everything from my clients, but maybe I could also be a little bit more Piscean than I am, and be a little bit more, I'd love to develop my own intuitive gifts and be more intuitive and be more empathic. So it swings both ways. There's lessons to learn on both sides of that polarity, and sometimes we need support from other people to learn more about those lessons.
Oh, most definitely, most definitely. So I'd like to end by sharing a little bit about ourselves, because we didn't get a chance to do that at the beginning of the show. So I kind of just give a very brief introduction, but can you please tell a little bit about yourself and how you help others with your counseling?
Sure, thanks. So like I said, I have a background as a psychotherapist, and then eventually I learned kind of astrology called evolutionary astrology, which gives me a lot more information and insight into what's happening for a person on the soul level. What are their major soul lessons? What are the old patterns or old baggage on a soul level that are getting in the person's way? And what are the new ways of being that their soul is calling them towards? So I've developed now a kind of a coaching practice that I call soul guidance, which is using the evolutionary astrology to get the map of the territory, to get to see what is the old baggage, what are the old patterns, what are the new ways of being, and what are the pathways that will help the person to move forward with their soul evolution. So I do a combination of astrology to get the map of the territory, and then I do really deep transformational processes to help the person to release the old and move into the new. So I also do work with people who want just the astrology, but the thing to understand is that astrology is great for information and insight, but it doesn't necessarily help people to make changes. It doesn't really help them necessarily to do the transformation that they need to do. And oftentimes people need support of another person to help them with the transformation. And that's why I do the soul guidance coaching process in addition to the astrology. And thanks for asking.
That's great. Now, you're out west. So can you tell people who are in that area where you're located, and also do you work with clients who are not where you're located?
Yeah, so I am based in Taos, New Mexico. I wish I could show you the mountain out there. It's looking spectacular in her cover of snow and clouds. And so I work with people here in Taos and Santa Fe, and I also work with people at a distance. So I've had clients all over the world. I use Skype, I use Google Hangout to work with people who are not local. And in fact, most of my clients are not local. So I really welcome people, from anywhere. And my website is my first name is www.soulguidance.com. sajit.net, and Sajit is spelled S-A-J-I-T, and that's sajit.net.
Great. And do you have an email, phone that people can contact you to schedule if they would like to have a consult with you?
Sure. So you can find me on Facebook as Sajit Green, and Green has an E at the end. My email is also my name, sajitgreen@gmail. So that's SAJITGREENE@gmail.com.
Great, great. And I know that you also give talks because you were here last year in Maryland.
Yes.
And so do you have any talks coming up in other parts of the country? Because maybe somebody out there is in a different part of the country and you might be coming to them soon.
Well, I haven't really crystallized this completely yet. I'm considering maybe doing something out in the Bay Area, actually in about a month, so I really need to get on this to get clear. Maybe I'm a little bit too picey and fuzzy today, but I may be doing something out either in Santa Cruz or Berkeley or maybe even San Rafael. So if you have listeners who are in the Bay Area, please contact me and I'll let you know what I'm going to offer while I'm out there. I've got a really powerful workshop called The Call of Your Soul. And people do not need to know anything about astrology. I will be looking at your astrology chart and understanding what your soul path is and then helping you to work with it within the workshop setting. And that's the same workshop I did in Baltimore. I'd be happy to come out to Baltimore again. The other thing is that I'm starting an online group for women called Women Awake. And so it's for women who are on the spiritual path of spiritual awakening and want support about how you actually live that in your day-to-day life, considering the fact that, yes, we are spirit, and yes, we're also personalities and bodies. And how do we live an awakened life and still deal with the emotional triggers that come up, and our old patterns that come up. So also, please contact me if you're interested. That's going to be online, so you can be anywhere and participate in that group.
Cool. That sounds cool. I might join. That sounds awesome.
Oh, that'd be great.
Very cool. And for our listeners out there, Spiritual Spectra Talk Show is about promoting emotional, physical, and spiritual wellness. And so I like to bring on wonderful people like Sajit today to talk about different issues that can help you through really getting to a better, happier, and healthier place in your life. And to introduce myself, I'm Jennifer Garcia, and I'm founder of Spiritual Spectra. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a certified energy healer and a psychic medium. I do spiritual consultations with clients, so sometimes they need guidance on their life choices and directions to take. I also meet with clients who need closure on loved ones who've passed on and want to communicate with their loved ones. And as a healer, I have so many people that have either stress or have a lot of, through their emotional boundaries, have a lot of emotional baggage that's still left in their bodies and in their spirit. And so my energy healing helps to release that from them so that they can move on to a healthier relationships with the people around them. And you can reach me at info@spiritualspectra.com, and my website is spiritualspectra.com. That's spiritualspectra.com. And like Sajit, I both work here in the Columbia, Maryland area. I have an office where I meet with consults, but I also do Skype, and I also do phone consultations. So I really can meet with anyone on the planet that really needs my help. And so thank you today, Sajit, for coming. I'm so glad we were able to get past our little technical bugs at the beginning to finally have Google Hangout. I really wanted to have you on the show, and so I'm really excited that we were able to do this today. And I hope that now that we've figured it out, hopefully, that we can do more Google Hangouts. You can start doing more on your end, that I can do more on mine. And so thanks again for coming today. And thank you, everyone out there. As you listen to our show, you can find our website, spiritualspectratalkshow.com, for upcoming shows. And I'm open to suggestion if you have any topics that you'd like to hear about. And I would love to bring some speakers in to talk about something that you need to hear. Good day.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. Bye-bye.